You ready, Sadie?
We are.
Terrific. Let's go ahead and bring the December 7th, 2021 council workshop to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Johnson,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Evans,
Here.
Councilmember Carter,
Here.
Councilmember Dole,
I am here.
Councilmember Ishmael, Councilmember McClymonds,
Here.
Councilmember Squatman,
Present.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Terrific. Good evening, everyone. First off, we have appointments. We have oath of office to Councilmember Angela Ismail and also Councilmember Gwendolyn Fullerton. So Sadie, I'll let you take it away.
And Councilmember-elect Fullerton, we're going to go ahead and go to the front of the dais so that the owls will pick you guys up. And do a little bit of rearranging here. There. I think someplace. I'm going to administer both of your oaths together. Please state your names separately, though, starting with Councilmember Ishmael first, and then we'll do Councilmember-elect, okay? And then afterwards, go ahead and repeat the rest in unison. Okay, please raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Angela Ishmael, I, Gwendolyn Fullerton,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
and laws of the State of Washington
and laws of the State of Washington
and all local ordinances,
and all local ordinances,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
perform and discharge the duties
perform and discharge the duties
of the office of council member
of the office of council member
according to the law and the best of my ability.
according to the law and to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Before Councilmember Dole actually steps down, I would like to thank him for all of his hard work and the service he has done for the city of Bonnie Lake and the community.
Congratulations, council members.
I would like to ask Councilmember Fulton to go ahead. Okay, thank you. And
All right. Congratulations again, Councilmember Ismail and Fullerton. Welcome aboard. Next up, we have a presentation, update on Public Services Center project. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're bringing that up on the screen now. In here. Ooh, that's sensitive. Okay. All right. Good evening, Council, Mayor. Brought forward a brief project update for you, and we'll be talking a little bit more about some aspects of the project later. But I did want to go ahead, at the encouragement of CDC, bring this forward to you to get everybody kind of on the same page where we're at right now in the project. And so we'll go ahead and move forward here. I wanted to start off with a little bit of history. The original concept for the Public Works Center was going to be a split site, split between the back roughly half top view here of the Compass Point site, and then the remainder over here on the peaking storage site off of Due to several different reasons, the decision was made to place it all on one site, which is the peaking storage reservoir where we have the project. At the bottom of that slide there, you can see what the financing picture looked like. There were 17 million in revenue bonds, and then the remainder of the project funds were made up from contributions from the utilities and the general fund, for a total of nearly $25 million on the project. Another important aspect to remember is that this project is actually 3 projects. Starting in 2018, John Woodcock and the engineering group completed 2 different projects to prepare the site for the construction of the public services. They were the mass grading and stormwater project and the offsite improvements projects. And as you can tell from the names, the first one was prepping the actual building pad, if you will, on the property. And the offsite improvements were correcting in a couple different site distance issues in 96. We had some vertical curve issues. It was also putting in water lines, sidewalks, gutter on 96. The third project, of course, out of those 3 would be the actual construction of the Public Services Center buildings themselves and remaining on-site civil infrastructure. That was advertised in March of 2020, March 23rd, actually, which I think was the first day that we all started to work differently, if you will. We advertised the project, received a bid from Bershauer Group, BGI, of a hair over $16 million. Once you factor in the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, the engineering services, architectural services, permitting costs, the estimated total project cost would be at $2,223,148. Thank you, $20,223,148. At this point, when the project was advertised and then awarded, we had about $21.6 million available. These funds have been earning interest, so that brings us now to a total of, as of right now, $22,541,585 available to complete. Current status, just quickly, there's an overview of the site and a couple shots from inside various portions of the Public Services Center. The building, I guess I'd say down here at the bottom, that's building A. That is the main administrative building for the site. This right here is building B, and that will be our vehicle repair mechanics shop. This is not constructed yet, but building D will be back here. And building D is really a simple building. It's just concrete pad, walls, and then a fabric cover. It's going to be a material storage area. Building F is this next area here where you can see there's some earthwork going on. There's been some concrete flints poured. This will be coverage for large vehicle storage. So our dump trucks, what have you, things like that will be there. And then building E, which is this is a quick shot of one section of the upstairs of building A. The wall board is up and they're making significant progress. They've been painting. The next big item will be the flooring to go in towards the end of this month. Down below, this is building B, so it's a couple of the service bays there. And then this is back in building A. This is the large meeting room, and this is taken from the perspective of the lunchroom looking towards that meeting room. We'll be talking about this room a little bit more later when we talk about the AV information that you have on your agenda. Basically just ran through this. I don't know that I'll spend too much time here. This is just a status of each of the buildings. A is nearing completion. B is also starting to get closer to completion as well. D has not started, although we are awaiting delivery of the roof structure. E is preparing for concrete installation of perforated steel curtain walls. F, again, they poured the plinths and should be setting the steel with that in the next 2 weeks. And then we're just about through with all the on-site stuff. The paperwork side of things, if you will. Total request for information to date from the contractor totals 263. That is a lot of RFIs. Total approved change orders at this point are 33, and there's an additional 20 in the hopper that we're currently working on with our consultant and design team and the contractor. Total change order cost up to this point has been $794,000. We had a total budget of $802,000. I do anticipate that this line item in our project is going to go over the budgeted amount. Anticipated change orders still to come. That dollar amount that we see right now on those 20 that are in the pending copper, if you will, is about 200. Total budget spent up to this point is almost 16 million, 15.8 million, which puts us about 78% of the estimated project cost and about 70% of the overall total project. Briefly, schedule-wise, we're anticipating the buildings will be completed in February of next year. We do have to wait for the weather and temperature to cooperate with us to put paving down on the site, so that will wait until April. And we're anticipating a staff move in April/May of next year. And that concludes the presentation.
Where's building C?
There is no building C, thank you. Building C was the decamp facility. We pulled that out of this project. And it is not completely gone. It is backburnered. The plan is to get through this construction, see what funds we may have remaining. And there are two things that actually we're looking at that have been backburnered. There would be the decamp facility that we'd like to get constructed and potentially a fueling station as well.
Where did the funds to pay the $17 million bond that was?
Yeah, I think Sherry is online and she would be able to speak to the revenue bond process better than I would. Sherry, did you hear that question?
I just heard about 17 million bond. I didn't hear the question.
Where do the funds to repay the $17 million?
Where does it come from? It's coming from the water and sewer and storm funds. Did that answer the question?
That did, thank you. So
I have a question.
There were no state grants or anything.
No.
We took a councilmatic bond out on that one, right?
That's correct.
It's a revenue bond. It's not a councilmanic bond. It's called a revenue bond.
I think Councilmember Carter had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ryan, could you maybe speak to the number of change orders and the amount there? I mean, it looks like you're going to hit like $1 million in change orders. If you could just tell us a little bit about those and why those are occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So on the change order front, we've had a few challenges. In order to properly explain this, let me take a step back. When we were in the design phase, one of the issues starting to approach the final portion of the design was that the design was going to be a stick-built building on-site, more of a traditional construction. I have my architect here who can speak a little bit more to what that all entails. Bottom line is it was a more expensive building. So what we elected to do was go with a pre-engineered manufacturing. So it's you can think of that as more as like the sections of it are built off-site, and then they bring it in and put it up. So moving forward, when we advertised the project, the steel building portion of the project was going to be furnished by the contractor. So it was not something that we were going to be furnishing the complete design for ourselves. The building itself was defined by a performance spec, which basically means that we're defining what the function of the building should be, and then the contractor would furnish the design to meet that. As once we received the design from the contractor, we realized that there was some inconsistencies between the way the foundations were designed by our design team and the design of the steel buildings. So at this point, we had two options. We could totally stop the project, go back into redesign, or we could move forward and address each of these issues as we moved through construction. If we stopped the project, we would at that point be incurring significant delay because of the fact that the steel building designer would have to go back, redesign the steel building, and then come forward with that new design, which would have to be reviewed again and so on. We elected not to go that route because of the delay, and there's a cost with that delay. We were also seeing the beginnings of the steel prices just going absolutely astronomical. And the decision we made with the information we had in front of us at the time was to go with option B, which I described to you. So in that change order total that I showed you on that previous slide, of that $796,000 that's been approved, there's approximately $600,000 worth of change orders to rectify the issues with the foundations for those buildings. And that would be for A, B, and E. And I don't believe we're anticipating any more than that. So it would be for those 3 buildings.
So I don't understand how the city incurred any, costs for liability. And so, and that's why we kind of brought this down from CDC, right? It's very unclear to me where, it became the citizens' problem to have to pay for a design problem is what it appears, right? On cursory kind of flyby, typical council member comment, right? I'm like, wait a minute, we had a building design is what I understand. And then we went out to bid for the existing design, right? And we awarded the bid. And then for some odd reason, I'm hearing that they came back and said, oh, by the way, we can't do that. And blamed us / the designer that they made a foundation that was incompatible with a existing steel structure that we, something like that.
Yeah, and really quick, let me make an introduction here. This is Dan Podol from ARC Architects. I invited him to come here tonight to participate in the discussion. I'm judging from the fact that you got up here, you might be able to help me out.
You might know that.
I'm going to try.
So, yeah, please, yeah.
So Dan, I appreciate you allowing us to be here. Is this on?
It is.
And first of all, I don't think there's any blame. I would like to just clarify that.
Well, something went wrong, so there definitely has to be blame, right?
I would recategorize that.
Okay.
And not, again, try to apply blame in the fact that.
Blame's not a bad thing.
No, the
It's a
decision.
responsibility.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the responsibility was on the contractor. What happened was, our design was a basis of design. So the basis wasn't complete, knowing when we made the decisions to put it out on the street that to go the pre-engineered metal building manufacturer route, we had to give a basis.
Sure.
And that allowed the open market for the pre-engineered metal building to be procured, by bidders, correct bidders. It kept it as flexible as possible because of that. And of course, the lowest bid that we would have expected was the winning bid. That said, when the process began to come through, we considered it always a deferred, what we call a deferred submittal. And it was clear to the contractor it was a deferred submittal so that he would take on responsibility of that deferred submittal to coordinate all the issues. When we saw the first submittal come in, they had completely changed the pre-engineered metal building manual, completely changed what I'd say the structural access of the buildings, and they added what are called portal frames, which changed direction to the basis of our design. That's what drove the need to correct or revise the foundation design that we had put out there to begin with. And that in itself is where the cost became incurred upon the project itself.
But I don't understand, because clearly, I'm kind of confused on this, bid thing scenario where they, here's your basis design, and you bid on it, build it for what you said you were going to build it.
Right.
And don't come back to, quote unquote, me as a designer, you guys, and say, oh, by the way, the building that we selected, now you need to change your design. Right?
That's fair. That's a fair thing to bring up, and we did question that. What we were told, and at the time from the contractors, we would not only lose, for them to redesign it, we would lose our place in line for the steel manufacturing itself. So we've been kicked out of that completely. From that point on is when we made the decision to say, look, okay, we will move forward. And again, rightfully not knowing the full cost of that foundation design until we saw it come back through. So, and at that point in time was when we made the decision to move forward with everything for those changes.
Sure. Okay, this is a discussion.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah. Yeah, so you said they made the change, so that they added what, oh, portal?
They're called portal frames.
Okay, and who is they?
They, as Newport, they're the pre-engineered metal building manufacturer.
Okay, so you had a basis for your foundation,
Our basis,
and they changed that because they needed to use portals.
they changed it because that is their typical pre-engineered manufactured way to save money in steel. So that's the reason they would have made those decisions. I don't know why they did it. That's what we know.
Okay, so then that discussion was between the city and the steelman, the contractor.
That was solely between the contractor and his bidder, the Newport. We had no.
So at what point was the city consulted and informed that there would be an increase in the cost?
When we saw the submittals, when the submittals actually came back to us, to actually review them for the city, is when we then saw the need for the additional cost. Because we then had to go back and redesign the foundations to be able to carry that new design.
And what's the total value of the contract?
The total value, First Tower's bid was $16,049,000.
And what was the cost of the change?
600. Yeah, 600 and change. I could give you the exact number. I don't have the exact number.
That sounds.
So that's about 0.5% of the value.
Roughly.
That, again, is
So what's your management reserve?
So what we had in the contract is we had both a design contingency and a line item for change orders themselves. And so those two made up, I guess, essentially the management. We had $802,000 for change orders, which was 5% of the anticipated project cost. And then we had another $190,000 for design contingency, which was, that is, of the total project cost.
Yeah, well, I guess I was wondering, I would think a contractor would establish management. Of 10% is probably.
I would, yes, we don't know that, but yes, we would have estimated that to be the case.
And that turns into profit when that management reserve. That's the way I make extra money, right?
Kelly and I, we do bids for a living, and one of the things we have to do is vet the vendor that we're getting the work from. So I can't just, I'm in steel manufacturing, so I can't just assume that I'm gonna go out and buy this $400 sheet of half-inch plate. Actually, I have to get a quote for that. So when I do bid at $400 and it comes back at $1,000, that's on me because I didn't do my due diligence in vetting that price out before I quoted it to my customer. Where's the accountability on the portion of our contractor to have done that same thing? Including not just the cost, but the design aspect. Because it sounds like they said, we need this building. I looked on your website, it's $18,000 or $1.8 million. And I'm going to plug that in there. And then when they got the work, they went to them and said, hey, here's our RFP. This is what we need. And they're like, no, here's $0.6 million. Well, that's not what your website says. Almost seems like there was a disconnect there in accountability on their part. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, because of the way we advertised the project and the contract for the steel building was the contractor's responsibility, I can only make some assumptions on that. But yes, I would assume that there would be, you know, the onus would be on the contractor to do some work there in order to verify and fix those things.
And to Dan's initial point, why is that my neighbor's problem? Why are they paying for it?
Yeah, and I think that was the timing issue thing, right? It's kind of what I don't know if I was fully understanding the conversation, but that's what, you know, it kind of gets to, they came back and said, hey, you know, we're gonna have to use this design to get it in here. Because it's in the manufacturing of the steel run that they're working with.
That's exactly it, Dan. When we were at that point, the information we had available,
Sure.
it was much more cost effective to go this route versus losing our place in the manufacturing line.
Well, I don't know how it's more cost effective though, right?
Well, we also there is a cost for delay because the contractor will definitely seek reimbursement for having mobilized on site, and there's a per day cost for them just to be sitting there. But there is.
Yeah, kind of.
There absolutely is.
Yeah, the delay wasn't caused by us.
And certainly that
They couldn't get their material. I don't see how they can come kill you our material.
And that may be the case, but trying to hash that out at that time right then
Right.
was not going to be something
No,
we were
yeah,
able to do.
and again, I don't know if I'm accurately hearing the whole thing, because I don't have a huge problem where we're at.
Sure.
I'm just kind of worried. It sounds like, that internally, one of the examples, we had like a $600,000 issue that we were dealing with. You guys made the right decision in the end, likely to say, this is the best path forward. But I don't remember any conversation where, and I don't know if the council's sensitive to it, because it is down in that whatever 0.5% of the project, right? Type of thing, which sounds, on one side, it sounds like $600,000 is a large decision kind of point. And on the other end, it's kind of like, yeah, well, it's a $22.4 million building you're dealing with. So, there wasn't any conversation at the committee level that I was aware of, hey, wait a minute, we've come up with this problem, what do you guys think? What, that kind of thing, or is it normally, what's the council's expectation on conversation wise when we come up on these things, even though, ironically, the 600, again, it's an ultra small amount when you're dealing with a large thing,
Yeah, just to finish up what I was saying there though too, we did have to consider at the time what we were seeing cost as well. And that was just the other half of the implication there that I was talking about.
Because we're going to wrap it up with some of the other things that we're going to discuss later on tonight. Some of these other things. That's why I kind of got drugged down here, in my opinion. Well, I know say a little more antsy with sensitivity to being able to say, oh yeah, that's fine, we'll just go with that type of thing, as opposed to, no, we're not going to do that. You did this. You said you're going to get the job done. This, it's turn into one of those draw things where stop it. We're going to start suing people because they're not performing to what they contracted to do. Those kind of discussions.
Yeah, Dan, that was what I was going to add, that these conversations aren't done with the contractor yet, so we're still in the midst of all of this negotiated talk with them. None of it's been.
Because when they have 263 RFIs or something like that, and again, not like projects work necessarily, it sounds extreme. I don't know if that's out of the ordinary. Why are we getting so many RFIs? Are they using those to try to process?
About 10% of those result in a change order.
Well, why would there ever be, what, in an RFI, a request for information? They're trying to clarify what the specs are. So that gets me to scratch my head and say, well, wait a minute, why in the world are they trying to figure out what the specs are? We pay somebody or multiple companies to design the thing we're going to build.
And that's what we're used to. I mean, I wouldn't say that the 260 is extraordinary a lot, but
sure,
it's a little more than what we expected. But yes, and I can't guess as to why they've written a lot. I do know that we spent a lot of time as a team trying to get clarity on a lot of RFIs, meaning the question isn't even asked very clear. And so we spent a lot of time clarifying that question for them.
Isn't that kind of strange?
It is strange. And
why, because, building things or what have you, if your design is accurate, has all the information, ultimately, but of course there always is issues.
3.75%. That change. Not a 0.5%.
Oh, okay. Depends on which end you're looking at.
Actually, Matt.
Still 60% of our reserve.
So do we have any other questions for Ryan?
Not yet.
Well, we talked about the cost. Was there a savings?
Terry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
No, it's good.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I just had one other question for Ryan, and it's kind of down the same lane there. Those change orders, you've got, I think, 20 more coming. Can you speak a little bit to what all those are? I know with the ones in the past, but now what's still coming that hasn't been, I guess, approved, or I can't remember what the terminology was on there, but.
Sure, and I couldn't go through all of them by memory right now, and certainly we've had to adjust things like where utilities are at in the ground. We've had changes due to some of the gate manufacturing, or gates that we're putting in. It's an assortment of different things. Oh, thank you. Yeah, John reminded me, getting the gas installed on site from Puget Sound Energy required a change order. So it's a number of different things.
And some of those, again, are directly related to redesign of the footings and foundation, because the foundation grew and then, blocked an area where utilities were going through or something like that. Some of that detail is also.
Thank you.
Or have there been any savings as a result of this?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say that the savings that were originally, our estimate was, 18 plus million.
Correct.
So, we thought we were saving at the $16 million bid by that, by that simple math.
Yeah,
So yes, I was gonna say our basis of cost estimate was 2 million plus higher in that we thought we'd be spending that.
I just know steel prices are dropping now versus when we were building all this in
Yes.
the height where the commodity-based product was no longer being sold at commodity-based pricing. It was sold at supply demand pricing, and beyond what was already selling on market was more than 100% higher than what it would have been a year ago. So that was there truly any savings by building it the height of that versus had we pushed it back out as a result of all of that?
yeah, I couldn't tell you that tonight, and that's not something that we've gone back and specifically looked at. Empirically, just like you said, looking at the cost of steel and where we were at the time. I mean, this past July, steel was up 200% over what we were seeing the year previous. I could make some assumptions, but I don't know that that would be helpful right now.
Thank you.
So is that it for Ryan?
Yeah, well, we'll get down to the other, the nuts and bolts of the issues there, the items today. Those are the ones. Why we're here, basically. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll move on to council open discussion. Councilmember Watson, do you have anything?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of course I do. I just want to say thank you to the finance department. We did the exit review today. Did an outstanding job. We've had a number of reviews over the years. We see some challenges we've had in the past, and Sharon and her team did a great job getting things cleaned up. There was no problems today that were brought forward to us. I know it's not easy. It's good to see what they've done for us, and I appreciate it.
Terrific. Yeah. Thank you, Sherry, very much. Finance department does a great job, and been doing well for many years. So very happy with that. Thank you, Tom. Councilmember McClymans.
Yeah, so Bonnie Lake's tenure on the South Sound 911 board. Wife will be replacing Pete. During the tenure on 911, the South Sound 911 has completed construction of their new facility and moved in, and it's operational. I think that's been a complete success. Unfortunately, that came during COVID, and that has brought some staffing challenges with them, so we haven't got quite the performance improvement you would like to realize out of your 911 system. The other issue that we have still lying before us is the radio. A lot of the money goes through 911, but they claim they're not a service. So it looked like they had a solution and that was moving forward, and we made progress in that the two radio services were working together and providing a roadmap forward. And there's some significant opportunities in the future, but our tenure is going to come to an end. The fix that we need for our police. So I thought I'd report out on that. Overall, South Sound 911, like it's moving in the right way. They've made a lot of good progress. Their performance can and should improve, right? But they have some challenges ahead of them with staffing, and I think say that today, and people are understand what's going on. They know that that's going to take a while to sort out. I just wanted to let you know that.
Is that part of the agreement they flip flop the board members or prior meeting?
Right. Yeah. So we're one of the smaller users, and so the agreement is that the smaller users rotate, and so our tenure is that we were the first tenure on the first city in that position for the Puget Sound 911. It had just transitioned to that structure, and so now Fife will be moving into it. Tacoma and Pierce County, and I believe Puyallup are represented, but smaller localities like Sumner and Fife and Milton they rotate through. And so Fife is the next one up, and I'm going to make every effort to coordinate with my replacement so that we keep this radio issue moving forward, and we can kind of get a solution for it forward.
Is it a 1 year or 2 year rotation?
Mine has been about 18 months, so it should be 1 year.
Okay.
Right, but I got
A year.
Oh, okay. You know, Brian, is that rotating every 24 months to a different city?
I think it's supposed to be yearly,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's based on population. So the smaller cities have one vote, and it's rotated, the presence on the board is rotated between Sumner, Fife, and Bonnie Lake,
Oh, okay.
based on population. And of those, we have the biggest population, that's why we got the first bracket on that.
We'll be back in 2 years then?
Yes.
Okay.
Terrific. Thank you, Councilmember McClymans. Appreciate that. Any other open discussion? Go ahead. Who's that?
This is Deputy Mayor Evans.
Go ahead.
The City of Bonnie Lake sits on the Pierce County Regional Board, a monthly group, and we just Growth Management Act. We work on Vision 2050, 2060 as things come along. Talk about traffic impact and things on that side of things regionally. It's a subset of the Puget Sound Regional Council. I've sat on it for 6 years. We're coming up for people change over in January. I've always been appointed to it, but I'd love to give anyone an opportunity if they so wish to join. If not, I'm more than willing to serve again, but I know it's been a great opportunity for me, and I would love to see someone else that might have a passion and interest in that get that opportunity as well. So something we've got to think about for our first meeting next year, but just wanted to throw that out there for everyone.
Thank you, Councilmember. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Councilmember Watson, was that you?
No, I think Councilmember Fullerton was commenting on that.
Yeah, Councilmember Fullerton asked what it entailed, and I told her I'd tell her offline just to keep it brief.
Okay. Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor Evans.
The question though, I didn't fully understand what we're doing. Structured nowadays. It's, I don't know, it seems kind of strange that the IT guy is in charge of clerk office, human resources, senior center, and all those folks. So trying to figure out what kind of fit that is, what kind of deal that is. Like, almost maybe a moot point since we were having a new executive here shortly. But
yeah, so Mayor Johnson made an interim appointment on appointing Chuck McEwen as the interim administrative services director. And then Mayor-elect McCullough and I will be talking about the proposed plan for the administrative services department shortly after the new year.
That doesn't seem to be a strange fit or not, you know, for somebody that's, I don't know, Chuck's background, of course, because I don't admit through the city, but that, you know, it just seems strange. Doesn't it strike anybody as strange that you have an
No,
IT guy?
it's not strange. Chuck is a good manager. He's a smart guy. He's managed well. Yeah, he may not look like the perfect fit, Dan, but he's very good at what he does, and he's a good manager.
Yeah, I just didn't fully understand that kind of thing. I guess it being an interim, you know, it's like I said, almost a moot point.
Yeah, and that's all it is. It's interim, and because we wanted to find out if even Chuck likes it. He may not even want to do that after a year, but he's very good at what he does. He's a good manager. He's showed his stripes very well, and he deserves an opportunity to show that. So I did that, and I'll stand behind it. We have good people in this city, and we got to try to keep them around rather than just let them roll out of town. So that's where I'm at.
Mr. Mayor, is he still in charge of the IT?
Yes,
IT code and governance?
he's still in charge of all the IT, correct. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any, sir.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the review of the council minutes. Councilmember Watson, Councilmember Carter.
A couple of corrections taken care of.
All right, Councilmember Carter, you agree?
I agree. Look good.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much. All right, I think item E, I think we have a discussion. Sadie?
This is item E, which is AB 2185, ordinance D 2185. And this is just up for discussion, and the council motion for discussion is changing the zoning classification of properties to ensure consistency with the city's adopted comprehensive plan.
Terrific. I think, Jason, are you leading the charge on this?
I am, and we were actually down to the last map. There was this one map 6, and there were 2 parcels that the council had questions on. At the last meeting, if you go to page 79 of your packet, I kind of did some additional research. When we went back and looked at those parcels, when we drew the future land use map, we draw those based on environmental features, not necessarily property lines. These 2 parcels were split designated with 80% of it in the RC5 and 20% of it still remaining in the R1. The parcels were included completely in the proposed RC5 because best practices is not to split zone properties because it becomes very hard to regulate when there's not that property line, because what do you do when the person owns half and half? So it's not a best practice. So anytime you get that 80, 75% split designation, we go with whichever one is the largest one. However, given the concerns raised by the city council, the council has kind of 3 options. 1, leave the map as it is, which means those 2 parcels would become RC5 100%. The other option is to leave them in the R1. We don't believe that's as consistent with the comprehensive plan, but it is an option. The third option is to split zone the properties. And if you look at page 80, we actually went through and measured where that split zoning would occur. And so the front half of the property, which is the developable portion of the property, would remain R1. This would allow for the development that those homeowners had discussed with me, still in the R1. And the RC5 would just basically apply to the non-developable areas on the backside of the property. At this point, we have all 3 maps ready. We just need council direction to let us know which map they want us to include for map 6. It's either the current one, the split zone, or all. That was the last issue that was discussed at our last meeting, was the last kind of hang up on that.
So the RC5 zoning there with those, I guess we call them map 6? Is what
Yes.
Is the penalty corridor piece there?
Correct.
Yeah. Currently, right now, the proposal includes more than, it includes quite a few parcels, right? Yeah.
Correct. And there was 2 property owners that sent in comments, and this was Councilmember McClymon's question. It was those, and who were kind of concerned with the proposed change, and it was the last 2 parcels.
Right.
And so since they were neighbors, we just kind of looked at them together and said, what are our options here to, 1, address the comprehensive plan consistency question, 2, make sure the zoning is consistent with the critical areas on the site, and 3, address the council's concerns via the public's concerns. We think the split zone option, while maybe not the best, does all 3. It puts the critical area into the RC5, which is where it belongs. It protects the critical areas. It ensures consistency because it is split designated in the comprehensive plan. And it still allows for the front half of those properties to be developed at R1. We think it's the best solution.
Yeah, but right now you're talking about those 2 parcels that you're kind of focused on in that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So there's quite a few parcels again involved in this proposed rezone, right? And your reference to the comprehensive plan and it being consistent or non-consistent with the comprehensive plan is a previously passed comprehensive plan that the council does.
Correct.
Yeah, so, so the previous council our body decided that RC5 was probably the most appropriate for that area. Now we're at the stage where we're actually going to rezone them. The comprehensive plan is just that. It's just kind of a plan, an idea, in the future, kind of where we want to get to.
Well, and it wasn't just the comprehensive plan that kind of said it should be this. It was the environmental impact study that looked at the soils. It was the watershed protection plan that looked at the critical areas. The lots in there really aren't developable. These
Wait,
were.
so that's what I'm kind of wondering about. And I don't know if I'm even because I'm looking at those, and I went back and looked at the map on those, and almost every single lot that I'm looking at, and I don't know again if I'm looking at the right thing, already has homes on it.
These 2 are vacant.
Those 2.
Right.
There's like, how many lots?
There are some other ones that have homes. That have homes on them.
So,
Some of them, so there's a mixture.
There's a lot.
The other ones,
The vast majority, unless I'm looking at the wrong map, and maybe we can maybe I'm on the wrong page. I'm good at that.
what I could say is of the ones that are, so if you look at map 6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I would say, so there's 2 things. There is a portion of them that are vacant. The larger ones are vacant. Some of the smaller ones do have a single family home on them.
Almost all, I think there's
But all of
the
the,
26 parcels or whatever, plus or I just counted, I don't know. Am I in the right area? And
yes.
like almost all of them, with the exception of probably 4 of them, have actual.
but their lots are large enough that they could continue to be subdivided.
Right. Yeah, then that's fine.
But they have problems with the critical areas code.
Right.
So the critical areas code and what people are anticipating to be able to subdivide their property aren't lining up. So you're creating this misconception that these properties are further developable, which is why we're trying to correct the zoning so that the zoning is consistent with the environmental regulations, so that when people are looking at what their property is developable as, it's not the same analysis that's giving them a kind of a false analysis.
So there's a whole group of these properties that are relatively small, quite small, that have some.
Most of them are over 5 acres.
Did the numbers is probably not completely accurate, right?
Well, the 2 that we're talking about at the bottom are 6.78 acres.
Sure. Yeah.
The next 2 are split, and there is 2 small ones there. And then there's another small chunk right around 101st. There's 1, 2 small ones. So there are probably, yes, out of the 26, a handful, 3 or 4 that are less than 5 acres. There's probably a group that's between 2.5 to 5 acres.
So
Yeah, but that was,
an RC5 is like or most,
from density.
well, from almost anything, right? Wouldn't that be, you know, if there's any kind of a conversation that somebody's having and they're like saying, oh, you know, we got this problem with these, RC5 is what we want to preserve, it's more open, you know, it's critical areas on it, so we apply these RC5 to like the side of a hill, so somebody can't build an apartment on the side of a hill.
And these are sides of hills.
And all those little matrix that we draw out that says that you can build, you know, a garage, a duplex, on your property.
Not a farmhouse.
Farmhouse, you know.
So when it comes to.
More unlikely to be included in an RC5 zone, right?
So when it comes to an R1 and an RC5, the permitted uses are almost identical. The bigger issue, the difference between those zones comes down to density. R1 is 4 to 5 units per net acre. RC5 is 1 unit for every 5 acres gross acre. So you've got kind of two analyses going on here. One, we're looking at what the comprehensive plan says. The comprehensive plan put it into designation, which is what our 1995 EIS should be. Most of the properties, to get access to them, you would have to build a bridge across Funnel Creek and across the Funnel Creek Trail that we just built. Because all the access is from Angela, and you can't really get access from this side.
But again, ironically, most of the properties are already built on, already have access, already have people living on them.
The ones up 101st, that's where there's this group of a little bit of a cluster. They're still heavily encumbered by critical areas. We still provided comfort. We provided notice to all the property owners. We had no objection to the ones that you're referring to. The only two public comments that we got for this list from the mailing that we sent out was the last two parcels, which is what at the last meeting was the only concern that council had was with these last two parcels. So those are the two that we focused on.
So I would think council has choices in front of them. So I guess kind of get a straw vote as far as which ones we're going to move on with.
Restricting those parcels that have homes on them. Their homes can stay, they just can't separate the property and build exterior structures.
They can't separate and create new lots. They can still build an ADU, which is the same as an R1.
Right.
They can still build detached garages.
Right.
They can still build, or rebuild their single family home.
Right. They just can't subdivide and sell to a developer and say, hey, you can build some townhomes here.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah, taking the rezoning of the last two and dual zoning them, is that what you're saying? R5 and R1?
Yeah, split zone.
So of those properties, those are 6 acres, right? So how many acres are?
It's about an acre in the front.
And you get an acre of R1.
Correct.
And then the 5 in the back would
Correct.
be R5.
This is Councilmember McCollum. I guess my concern here is that, we need to be responsible about our zoning and critical areas, land use, right? And there is a GMA, but then there's also property rights that these people have. So I guess the expectation is, if people purchase property, in a time when their expectations were they would eventually do something with the property and realize that was before these land use decisions the council has made. I think the council needs to consider that because those people had a reasonable expectation at the time they purchased the property. If I own a piece of property and I decide I'm out of here and I want to sell it to a developer and to get the price I want, the developer has to develop it. That argument to me is really hard to reason through. I guess I need time to reason through that argument because they still are going to try to realize the benefit of it, but the developer will be benefiting from getting a loophole from the land. But where I want to try to preserve citizens' reasonable expectations for what they had originally intended for the property, I think that's reasonable to do that for the citizen. I think actually that's for me, that was part of what I wanted to do when I came to the council was protects citizens' property rights. So, you know, I liked your solution, Jason, and I applaud you for that solution. And then I applaud you for your willingness to say, okay, we'll take those lots out. And then you did even better than that. You far exceeded expectations by going to it and saying, well, maybe there's a split use solution, right? That's kind of good. So have we talked to the property owner about the split use?
Well, I didn't call him because I didn't want, like I said, I'm trying to look at what, just on map things. So, but I want to kind of come back and answer your question about this property rights issue. So there's the illusion of what you can get on a piece of property and what you could really get. So even if the council were today to say, we're not going to zone this RC5, we're going to zone it R1. The first thing the developer does when they call us or a property owner, the first thing we'll respond with is every critical area that's on these properties needs to be subtracted out. And then based on what's left, you get 4 to 5 units per net acre. So if you have 40 acres that's all encumbered, your net acreage is 0. So you get to subdivide it into 0 and you get to build one house. The RC5 does realize that we are putting there's this regulatory shift. And that's why I said that when Councilman Ishmael asked the question, I said R1 is 4 to 5 units per net acre. RC5 is 1 unit per gross acre. So if you have an R1 zone property that's 40 acres hypothetically, and it is wholly encumbered by critical area, you get one house, because to do density counts, we subtract out critical area. If you have a 40-acre plot that has wholly encumbered by critical areas under the RC5, you get 8. And we can cluster those up to 8. And we can cluster those houses so they're smaller lots, most removed from the critical area. But from a property rights standpoint, you actually have a little bit more flexibility on the 5 because of the way the density is calculated. Now, a person who just looks at a map and goes, I have 40 acres, I can do 4 units per acre, that's 160. That doesn't subtract out all those critical areas, so you go from 160 to 0. And so that's what I'm saying is that you could leave it all one, but you're just creating an illusion of developability when there isn't. The RC5 actually kind of restores some of that back in a better way.
Those who are listening, could you just kind of give a clarity on what a critical area is?
So a critical area is areas that are defined under the Growth Management Act. They include streams, floodplains, steep slopes, and wetlands and their buffers, and what we call riparian management zone or stream buffers. With the properties on the Fennel Creek corridor, which is why, going back to the original EIS, those 6 are present on every site. There are sites here that are in this thing that are either 100% encumbered by slopes, streams, floodplains, critical, that list. We can't change the list of what critical areas are. We can't say, oh, you can just remove that wetland. We have to preserve that wetland. And so that's why we propose the RC5, because based when you take both the zoning and the critical area regulations, the RC5 is the best solution. Not the perfect solution. It's the best solution. And with these 2 lots in the back, we're leaving that acre of R1 and letting the other 5 acres go into RC5 preserves as much. And it is the most developable portion up by the road. I believe that R1 would be enough for what that property owner discussed with me, which was she wanted to subdivide it into 2 lots and build a home for her and her daughter. So her expectations are, at least from the comments we've received, her expectations are still protected.
Well, it sounds like the RC5 is more flexible. It sounds like the RC5 gives the property owner more flexibility in using their property.
Well, not that particular owner, because.
Well, not that.
Not her, because her property was,
Yeah, not that one, but I think the rest of it, what I was hearing, had the larger piece, and you had the clustering ability with an RC5, an R1, you probably were not gonna work that. The way the regulation.
yeah, I wish I had like a whiteboard. So say you had a big chunk here, up by the road, we could create 800, not 800, but 7,000 square foot lots right up here along along the road and put the rest in the conservation. That would still meet the definition of an RC5 zone. It allows us to cluster smaller lots to return some of that developable right that was taken because of environmental protection. So it does sound counterintuitive, but it does, I think it tries to strike a balance in a situation where I don't think there's a lot of balance that you can sometimes strike.
Yeah, and I'm, the same with, I agree with Councilmember Clemens, and I think the property rights are, a core issue for people. Taxes over time, so it sounds like, again, to me, that Councilmember Clemens agrees that the RC5 is more flexible, is more appropriate.
Well, yeah,
it's a more option.
I think the split zoning is probably a reasonable solution because.
Yeah, on those two
things,
pieces.
and I applaud you. But that still preserves the ability. And then the other property owner that was concerned, we allayed her concerns because we said an ADU was an option instead of splitting the property and building two.
So these are the two property owners. So the property owner with that road, I think her name's, I'm probably butchering it. He owns the last property.
Okay.
The other one that looks like, I don't like this, is the property owner right. So by split zoning it, those two parcels, the way we propose, we've addressed the two commenters who commented on this proposed rezoning for that area. Yes.
I have a question.
I would be in favor
I am.
for those two parcels. And then the rest go with our.
Councilman Carter.
Councilman Carter?
Yeah, thanks. I just had a question I like the idea of the split zone. My question is about unintended consequences and what happens if, we do this for this person and the next person comes, hey, what? Change mine, split mine for whatever reason or whatever. What are the issues that goes with that?
Well, what we would do is that would be required both a comprehensive plan amendment and a city and a rezone. And so they would have to come in and demonstrate that when we applied the initial RC5 future land use designation, we applied it in error and therefore needed to be adjusted and then so forth, the zoning. I don't see that happening. I mean, I think one of the things, the other side of this is you have a lot of people who live down there who like to feel like they're living the rural area.
Yeah.
So I think you would have the opposite, I think you might have the opposite argument too. One of these properties gets proposed to be developed into 22 homes. I think you're going to have the surrounding neighbors saying, why are you destroying my community? So I think you're kind of we're in that situation where I think people are going to be happy and mad no matter what we do. But I think we're trying to strike a balance between preserving the area as it currently sets, protecting the critical area. And to your question, Councilman Carter, that may happen in the future, but there's a whole public process that involves the city council research to see if that were in fact, there's more data that would support that.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. I want to make sure we're thinking all the way through. That makes sense.
The mayor stepped away from. So it looks like we're kind of all in favor of the split zoning or a future council member vote. Probably has to be next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I would do is what we're going to do to protect this in the future is actually have our GIS staff write those numbers, the distance numbers on the map. So when we have to do this in the future and we're doing project review, we can always pull the map to see what specifically the council approved. So that will help with the split zone. So we'll just insert that into the ordinance, pull out the current map and insert the new map. And then the question would be, when I can consent or full council for the next meeting.
I'm okay with consent. Consensus is consent.
And I appreciate all the questions and willingness to work with us on this. I realize questions because you're dealing with someone's fundamental ownership. So we do respect that.
Thank you, guys. Well done.
Nice job.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item F.
This is item F for discussion on resolution 2978, which is about authorizing the mayor to approve the purchase of and sign a contract with Avidex for the procurement and installation of audiovisual equipment for the Public Services Center project.
Back to you, Ryan.
Yes, I believe, and Councilmember Swabman, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was originally came to CDC in September.
Right, yeah.
We've had some things that, more important business that has precluded us from bringing this back any sooner. When I brought it to CDC, there seemed to be some questions, and again, CDC members, please correct me if I'm wrong. There seemed to be some questions about not only cost, but the use of the building and how cost and that use aligns. So I put together a quick memo that's in the packet that just kind of summarizes, again, what that use was that we were envisioning for the building. And then the equipment selection itself, and there's some supporting documentation that shows costs of the individual items and so on. It has Avidex's proposal in it. To quickly summarize, the reason that we were going this direction and felt that we needed the that is proposed is because we were proposing to move the parks planning and design commission meetings out there, hearing examiner out there, and then we just have regular meetings that regularly occur. They would also be able to utilize this weekly meeting that the public works crew has. The big thing though with the commission meetings and the hearing examiner is that it eliminates some scheduling conflicts that we fairly regularly have to put up with now. It creates some delay. It's not good customer service for the public when they come into the building. And doing this way, putting those commission meetings and the hearing examiner out there, eliminate that. And I believe that that's why we're here, is we want to provide the best service we can for our public. And right now we're not doing that. So that's kind of the background on what you have in front of you. I'm obviously here for any questions. I guess that I would preemptively just say that if this is not something that the council chooses to move forward with, that's great. And obviously I fully support that, but I would look for direction from you then as to how you envision the building being used. And so I just kind of throw that out there as food for thought as we discuss this. I could certainly use help and input on that. So.
Yeah, I appreciate your synopsis there. Of course, bringing this down from CDC there. I'm just trying to get, the full council on how the building pointed out the conflicts between the meeting spaces that are driving the need of the multiple meeting spaces. To, make sure that, the council was aware of what was going on there, so they didn't think that, you did something kind of odd. But because I think one of the staff pointed out, and you just did with the planning commission meetings. We have court, but we're obviously going to remain in this space. So the planning commission meetings conflict at times.
Conflicts with the operations of the court, and so obviously those commission meetings can't occur until court is done for the day. And so oftentimes that means that the folks who are going to participate in those meetings are standing out here in the lobby waiting for that.
So is that something, that you can just say to them? Because I think, I don't know how the calendar lays out fully, because obviously the council is normally here on Tuesdays.
Yeah. For the commission meetings, I'm not sure. I would look for some direction from John on that. I can tell you that for the hearing examiner, which also has a similar problem, trying to sync up when this room is available and the hearing examiner is available, that solution would maybe not work for that example. But John, I don't know about different days for commission.
So the planning commission meetings are established by code, and so to change the meeting dates.
I didn't know how they, is it because the court, kind of picks their own days and they end up conflicting?
So it's like planning commission nights are on Wednesday. Wednesday is on lake court, and those are typically long, and I think most of these have been on public safety loads that are increasing coming out of COVID, and, we fully expect, at least for the foreseeable future, the court's caseload is increased.
Yeah. So they're kind of can run long, or what they're running case for the planning.
Yeah, and I should say those conflicts arose even pre.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But not that I would suggest it, but it seems the questioning person would say, well, fine, just put the planning commission Thursday or whatever, right? What's going on Thursday? We create another conflict or something?
Yeah, so I guess we have to look at, all of the dates for, planning commission, design commission, arts commission.
All of them.
We'd have to look at those in total and figure out a master. Everybody.
So,
How many spaces do we have in the city that have the equipment that you're talking about? Is this the only space?
This would be the only space right now, yeah.
Okay, so going forward, could the Public Works Center also be utilized by other departments as well? If they needed to use that space to reserve it for audiovisual communication? Could it also be used in our emergency management capacity as a hub? I know we have a problem with the room at the police office.
Absolutely on all counts. And I would just say that while we did not necessarily design the new Public Service Center to function as a dedicated EOC,
sure.
In any emergency, it's still going to be an EOC for our public works. And there will be a need to coordinate with other jurisdictions, and certainly that kind of equipment would come in handy with, reporting stuff for documentation, whatever it may be. There are other uses there, so yeah.
And it has a backup system, generator system.
It does.
At the new place.
It does. It's probably the biggest one I've ever seen.
Right, so I think that it's an investment for the city to give us a secondary space that can be multi-use. I see that as more just in the Public Works Department, but gives us a safety net for emergencies. It gives us a secondary space for staff to have different kinds of meetings, trainings, that we need as our city grows. So I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, the space is kind of, the easy issue, right? I think the issue that I was looking at with it is the expense of the type of. I don't know how many people actually delved into the details of. Because there's many ways to, facilitate the use of the space. And this is one of those examples where they went to the extreme of the cost of outfitting the space. I don't know how many different options that they got when they did, the space kind of thing, because I think you probably come to the conclusion that you need the space and it needs outfit for use. But again, probably one of my little things to harp on for a little while until I get tired of it is the extreme cost. It's the going to the car wash and hitting the best every time when you just need a good car wash. So, this, when we came back again, we had one bid that came back, or whatever it was, one option.
Yeah, so maybe a little bit of background. I selected. So what happens there in the master contract is that when you utilize that, it is treated as though you've gone through the competitive process. Price for equipment is negotiated and fixed at a certain point. The margin or profit that they're making off of that is actually negotiated down, so it's fairly small. I can't tell you exactly what it is.
Sure.
I know that Justin had a question on the labor rates. You'll notice in the proposal, I believe it says 200% of prevailing wage. Thank you. And certainly, that is something that gets negotiated with the contract as well. And one could say, I was talking to Chuck about this the other day because he also orders. That is one way that they try and make up that margin on the cost of the product. That's fully allowable and okay under the terms of the state master contract. I'm not an audio visual consultant, so I can't speak to the pricing of the projector in particular. That I'm just citing that because that's the most expensive item on there. I can't speak to that, but I do know that when we sat down with the AV consultant, I gave them plans. We looked at the size of the room. They were making some assumptions on how bright it will be. I mean, they put a design into this and considered what it would take to actually perform in the environment that it would be in. And that's what they came back as the recommended projector.
Yeah, and again, just because I have knowledge in that area, that is, it is the top end. It would be extraordinarily difficult to even go more top end than what they suggested. And that's what I thought was kind of odd because they didn't have any other proposals. It's like, well, you can use model A, B, or C, and this is what your effects are going to be. If you're trying to use it in daylight with all the windows open. Hey, but if you can coordinate a little bit and make sure window shades in there, you get that $10,000 off your projector, but, I didn't know where that landed at, kind of thing.
So, yeah, no, good question. I did not ask for any alternatives. Again, I selected them and
But we
they're the
have, we
experts.
have Chuck, right? That's why I'm like, but I guess, we have a very intelligent IT guy.
Sure.
And that is kind of my theme, that you can probably feel me writing down this gold-plated effort, right? It's kind of like, well, it doesn't matter, we'll just, and it's good stuff. It's gonna be there for a while.
Yeah.
But again,
And I did consult with Chuck. He did review the proposal.
so why wouldn't Chuck say, that's where it gets kind of frisky, right? And I'm good at getting frisky about, well, where's the rest of the options? You got this ultra high-end projector, this daylight projector virtually, that I don't know that anybody would normally buy. Besides, I'm shocked that somebody wouldn't look at that. Not necessarily you, of course, but you guys are really intelligent. Say, that's kind of weird. That's kind of top-endish. And then you would, have other options, and you'd bring it forward to the different committee or whoever and run it by and say, hey, what do you think? We're gonna run into these problems if we go this way, if we go this way. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilman.
Yeah, that was my concern at the CDC, the amount of money we're spending for that. We're gonna have a lot of people using these machines, and do they know how to operate them? And so here we have problems here with our civil code we have here. What's gonna happen down there? We have to have an IT guy there for every time we have a meeting. We don't need to go this high end for just a basic, means you need for your public works facility to have that personnel, and then we should go from there. Not trying to give a list to solve everybody's needs in the community. Then in the future, we find we shortchange, we need to add something to do that later, but I don't agree with the amount we're spending.
I can certainly appreciate where you're coming from, Councilmember Watson. I mean, certainly, we did give them what our criteria was, and that kind of ventures towards the discussion of the building. But oftentimes, when we decide that we're going to buy this in phases and spread it out over time, we're going to end up spending more money.
Yeah.
Then we have what's fine with what we get. Don't know.
Well, I think that, when we consider the use again that we're proposing, I don't know that, well, I know that we can't go in phases. We need to be able to record it, and to record it, we need microphones, and if we have microphones, we need an amplifier, and we need, so it just kind of goes on and on from
This
there.
particular bid didn't have the recording piece in it.
It did.
The microphone.
It did. It's in there.
Have the recording equipment that they use.
It has, it's all inclusive. It does include that, it contains the software solution for recording it. It is all.
Is it possible to go back with those guys, because I can kind of feel where we're at here, and say, hey, are there other options that we should look at?
Absolutely possible.
Just to look at, not saying we go those, because again, my main goal in bringing this down to the full council discussion, besides boring every years, was to try to, get a discussion about where we were at with our expectations for the space use, right? So if we could, to me, we obviously need to outfit the space, as Councilmember Schmelz pointed out. If you're going to use it, which obviously it's there, and we got good uses, we need to equip it. Maybe if I think it would be appropriate for us to hit the vendor up and say, really? And then look at those options, and maybe we go with that first option, I guess, Maybe that was my whole issue to begin with, is I didn't get options. I got sign here.
Noted.
Would it be beneficial, you're asking for, the low, medium, and high bid?
Well, they can, to me, they could get that from the vendor, because they're the experts. And they can point out that, oh, no, you don't understand, meaning me, talking to me and saying that this is what we have to have, or you're gonna run it.
Yeah, and just to let you know, after our CDC meeting, I have gone back to the vendor to discuss this. They believe in the work that they put forward, that this is the best solution for what it is that we're proposing for use. I can certainly have that conversation with them again, and I'm happy to do so. But I certified for that,
Sure,
but I
yeah.
have gone back to them.
Yeah, and again, you know, like I said, I just happen to know, and Chuck's little happy face and everything, that is a ultra high-end projector. It may be on the part of this one or even above this one. It's unusually high-endish.
So if this is 64,000, is there a number that you want them to get to?
No, but again, it's a monumental step between the projector that they proposed and the next one down. You know,
What would, do you know, have in the ballpark what that cost might be? Is it a $5,000 cost? Is it like a $25,000 cost?
right, exactly, because you're going from what was it, a $25,000 projector or something like that? So, you know, the next, and Chuck's, you know, waiting to get in.
It would be worth having Chuck do a presentation to us about what good for us to make, what makes sense.
I guess that would be a question for Chuck. I don't know what his expertise is on AV stuff. I know he's got a lot of expertise. That would be a question for, I have no idea.
Hey, Chuck, do you want to weigh in at all?
Sure. I certainly agree with Councilmember Swatman's assessment that this is a high-end projector. We did specifically say that when we're planning to have not only the commission meetings, but also staff meetings, staff training. So that's going to be during the day. A lot of the shape of the room, you know, it's sort of a long rectangular room. And the placement of the projector, the size of the screen is quite large. It's larger than what's in the council chambers. Because of the size of the room, the vendor did suggest going with this size of a projector. Could we have it really sounds the heartburn of the entire proposal is really in relation to the projector, which is you know, almost half the cost or a third of the cost of the entire project. It's something that we can definitely go back and discuss and look at other options and bring something back with maybe a tiered selection to council. But it's the idea that the vendor came back with was, for all the different reasons that you're coming to us, this is what we think would be your best option. Also with the understanding of, you know, this is a brand new building. It's a 50+ year building probably. You're going to have this not for 50 years. Technology changes, use changes, but this will last a very long time. Just like the large projector that is above you, we've had since this building was built, and we haven't changed it yet. What you have above you is using a lamp. It's not laser projection like was quoted in the Public Works Center. So we could certainly talk about switching to a lamp type projector. Laser technology is the more modern technology, but that doesn't, it's also much more expensive. So it's something that we can definitely discuss. And if it's really the projector and maybe the size of the screen that is what's causing the most kind of heartburn in terms of this entire proposal, something that we can definitely discuss and come back with multiple options.
Thank you, Chuck.
So, excuse me, this is Councilmember McCollum. I guess I'd also like, if we're gonna go back to the vendor, I'd like to see an option where you have plays that give you the ability to show multiple sources, as opposed to having to multiplex that through some other. Room. Yeah, because you'll wind up with multiple sources that you need, especially I would think in an EOC context. Fire, civil authorities. Right. So I don't know if that vendor can support that sort of a configuration. I've seen that done multiple times, and it's quite effective.
You broke up a little bit. Were you talking about multiple sources, multiple input sources?
Yeah, and I think Kelly was talking about, you know, when you're like an EOC environment.
Yeah, I've just seen, what I'm used to is seeing multiple flat panel displays nowadays. And then in some cases, all of the single source is multiplexed across the surface, the entire display surface. And at other times, individual feeds are fed to each individual display, right? So I know those things exist and they work effectively for reasonably sized rooms, a room about this size. Those have worked and they give you a little more flexibility. I was wondering, well, you know, if you're gonna go back to the vendor and you ask them if they can provide that, I think that would be easier for, well, I know it would be easier for certain training and certainly operations. There's certain key things that would help being able to show like fire, civil, law enforcement, sort of activities on each screen, right? Being able to plug in somebody's laptop and you can, they can display what they want. And then you can get like 4 or 5 cat videos all going.
And lawyers. So is that room just, you can't divide it in half or anything over there?
So the room as it's currently being constructed is have the conference room, and then there's a movable partition wall that opens up into the lunchroom.
Yeah.
And that becomes the larger room. And dimensionally, we're talking about a room that's probably, without the partition across, it's probably, 1.5 times this room here, roughly, something like that.
Yeah, you know, I encourage you to think about what Councilmember Clemens pointed out too, obviously, you know, because if you want to divide it up into 2 and you got the one projector, then it doesn't even work in the 2 configuration unless you, right?
I think normally it would just operate in the smaller function with the idea that if we had larger classes and training or what have you, that up. But I'm happy to go back to the vendor and have more conversations with them. Certainly that's an option. And one of the reasons that we didn't is that we weren't thinking EOC first when we were thinking about this room. We really were thinking more about a space where there would be trainings and what have you. But certainly we can take a look at that. Happy to.
Is there a time constraint on this decision?
Only in that right now, I think that we're up against probably seeing some price increases at the first of the year. It seems like there's always something like that. But if we're going to be going to a system that's going to cost less, maybe that's offset. So as far as construction goes, one of the big things, you know, we're going to finish the buildings in February. Right now, I'm having a hard time believing that it seems like all electronics and computers and everything else are going way out. I know Chuck, his IT order, he placed it in May of this year, and they're saying maybe he's going to get it in February of next year. I don't know at this point. I have to verify it.
Yeah.
So do we have enough information, Ryan?
I do. Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right, let's see here. Now we have item G.
Item G for discussion on resolution 2995 about authorizing approval of an amendment to the professional services agreement with ARC Architects for the continued construction management services for the construction of the Public Works Center.
Is Ryan the lucky guy again?
I am. Thank you.
All right.
And as I mentioned earlier, I did bring Dan here with me from ARC Architects, and he's going to help me out here on some of the discussion points to talk about the amendments in a little bit more detail. I will lead off with saying I know that when we brought this to CDC, there were some questions about the other amendments that have been approved so far, and I did just quickly want to summarize what those were for, so that we were all on the same page when considering the amendment, contract amendments you have in front of you this evening. For ARC and their team, which it's important to point out that they actually are a team, ARC also has KPFF as a sub-consultant to them for structural work, Cider Byers for mechanical, TFWB for electrical engineering, Nakano Associates for landscape architecture, and RH2 for civil engineering. When we are bringing amendments forward, oftentimes it is for all of those different, or many of those different consultants. Amendment number 1 that was approved in October 2020 was a total of $62,300. That amendment was made up primarily of funds that went to KPFF for revising the design of Building D, which is our material storage yard, And that revision was necessary to incorporate the fabric roof that we're waiting for on. And the building B crane bay, we moved from one bay to the other, and so there was some additional there. The balance of that, pretty much in that amendment, went to RH2 for preliminary design. And that was Amendment 1. Amendment 2, which was approved in May of 2021, so this year, was for a total of $118,000. That included funds for ARC, TFWB, RH2, KPFF, in varying amounts, and the work that had associated with it was additional support for the issues that we were working through with the pre-engineered metal building. We had a schedule extension from the original date that we thought we were going to be by, and we needed additional design support there. There was some of the structural redesign work for KPFF for buildings A, B, and E that we've discussed. That was in there. And that was Amendment 2. And then, of course, you have the proposed amendment in front of you this evening, which is basically to support the extension of the schedule again out to February of next year. And so if you do have questions at this point, I'm happy to open up and take those.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very good. I appreciate your laying all that out for us. Because, of course, the concern that we had, and I had specifically at the community level, was the continuation, like the ARC proposal, that for $74,000. Didn't understand exactly why.
Yeah, and again, this is specifically associated with the length of the contract. It's going longer than anticipated and estimated. And so that takes extra effort to cover that. It was not included originally because it wasn't anticipated.
So ARC is doing what work?
So, I'll turn it over to Dan here in a second, just to explain everybody's role. Though ARC is the architect, and they are the lead on the design team. They have been the lead designer through the entire design process and then providing that service.
But not understanding exactly what design service would.
But we're the eyes in the field right now for the city.
Well, you're the inspector?
No, we're not an inspector, we're the observer. So we represent essentially the city's interests.
So don't we have inspectors out there?
Yes, we do.
So what function do you observe?
We observe the design intent, that the intent of the documents is being followed by the.
So isn't the inspector responsible for making sure that the end product meets the design?
The building inspector is out there to ensure that the building is being constructed in compliance with the permit requirements.
Sure.
Which is different than the design.
And the design, because if the design says you need 4 bolts wherever, then the inspector, if they're inspecting for that, is saying, well, there's 4 bolts there.
Yeah, there's essentially dual responsibilities and all that. But again, our main job is to answer the RFIs that you're seeing that come in for the duration of the project and any sort of potential change orders that see coming that we either evaluate or disregard or again push back. But the true intent of the architect and construction administration is to observe the product being built in the field.
Sure, yeah, and then we had discussion at the committee level about the timeline kind of scenario, because I don't understand how the duration project time.
Correct. So the reason that the contract is being extended is for numerous reasons. There is the issue that extra time was taken to work, and I'm thinking specifically the foundation.
More than that, just for the record, These are why we have these discussions at committee level.
So there was extra time incurred in the project schedule. It was and just material procurement issues that have added time to the contract, given the conditions that we're working under right now. I mean, it's been some long lead times that we did not anticipate originally.
We understand the extent of the duration time period having to be extended, right? But not necessarily the work. right? Because the actual time it takes to do the task is kind of set, if you will.
Changing of the task is pretty minimal, even though the duration of the project has expanded, but the scope of the work was through completion of the project. So whether it's 3 months longer, if the work itself hasn't changed, why are we paying for duration extension?
I'm stuck with that as well.
Okay, so when a contractor comes in the beginning, we get a schedule from him on how he's going to accomplish the goal in a number of days and provide. Okay? So we had some of these change orders like this, like the foundation right out of the chute, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
That kind of threw that critical path. So as they're starting to reschedule on how to do things, as those things were being accomplished, other things weren't. That protracted that effort, right? And then as we went down, because it occurred in the very beginning.
That work effort, yeah, but I'm not seeing, again, I'm trying to get at why ARC needs more hours.
Well, we haven't finished here, because they're working with us through the end of the project. So they're still going to be given RFIs. Until we're done with this project, they're not going to end. So if we don't have them, who's going to answer these RFIs that are technically related to the design itself? So we have to have them on board to the end.
I just make one comment, and this is just strictly me, who I am and what I do. With all the RFIs, to me, that seems like an incomplete design from the beginning. Is that fair to say that if we're not providing all the information up front and they're needing to request it, was a failure on our end?
No, the number of RFIs is not extreme, as I said before. And there is an expectation that there are some unforeseen conditions. I mean, all of our projects do have RFIs that come with requests or to respond to. Again, it's not beyond what we've seen before. The issue of just what we do during CA is that we represent, again, the interests of the city to follow the documents by the contract.
Is ARC the project manager on this, or do we have a separate contracted project manager as well?
You have.
So we have KPG also functioning in that respect of taking care of pay estimates and so on.
Okay. Is this a full function? I get as an inspector myself, I understand the role of the inspector is, yes, are those 4 bolts in for this spec? They don't care if it's 13 inches off the wall or 12 and a half inches off the wall. They're not running that tape measure, making sure those bolts are anchored in properly. So I understand supervising the design portion of it, not necessarily the inspection portion of it. Is that, it seems like we have some redundancy here that may not be necessary?
No. So what we did is we do have a construction management team that has a couple elements to it, right? So the city doesn't have the staffing to do mundane things from day to day. So KPG is doing that for us. They're out there being city employees technically because we don't have that available. And they're also part of that construction management team. They're going to be answering all the technical questions about the design itself. They're not going to KPG for design answers. What KPG does for us is they go through every one of these change orders, right? And they make sure that we're paying what we should pay and not anything more. So for example, we had a change order for $200,000, but through the efforts of the team, we were able to get it down to something like $20,000. That's something that's given to us by, and in this case, it was by a subcontractor from the prime that submits a change order, and we've got several of these things that we have to beat down and whittle down. And if we don't have that on our side, then we don't really have
So how's the contractor generating a change order?
So, right, so we have the prime contractor and then subs, right? So when a sub does something, he thinks he's doing something out of scope. And they're going to present a change order, potential change order. And
Well, at that point, right, I'm sorry, this is a detail, it's just like a rabbit hole, but it's like, well, what is the design is the design. So if they decide that, hey, I'm going to do something different because this is much better. That's like a change order, one type or what have you, and then the city has to say, yeah, you're right. Do it that way, and we accept this change order kind of thing.
Yeah, we first see a PCO, which is a potential change order. It's not a change order. Yeah, we actually see that, and our job is to review that to either confirm or deny it.
Right, but that gets back again to what Councilmember was saying over here, was that, you know, the design is, we paid,
Right,
frankly,
some of them-
somebody for a really good design, we paid a lot of stuff, and then all of a sudden we come back and it's like, oh, well, we got a change order, we got an RFI.
Again, majority of those changes aren't from mistakes or errors in the document. They either something that was unforeseen in the field.
Well, how,
Or
you know,
a
is
change
there,
from-
and that's where I like, you know, just have a.
Or a change from the client side, the city side. You have made some changes.
That's fine, you know, those things go on. But I'm hearing multiple things, you know, I kind of hear this bouncy around kind of thing. Because of the, you know, you had this RFI issue that we kind of just like jumped over. I haven't seen any of these RFIs.
What RFI issue?
Whichever one, we said before there's 200 and some odd RFIs, right? Really? Well, how could there possibly be that many, you know, RFIs on a design that we paid a whole bunch of money for?
But I think anytime that the contractor has a question
Right.
about anything, they're gonna submit an RFI to get clarification.
Well, and yeah, exactly. The first
All of
issue,
the
right? Why in the world would they submit an RFI? Because the design was incomplete.
Not all of the RFIs are errors. Sometimes just questions that we have to answer.
And that's what I don't understand. I haven't seen any of these, right? So I'm just like stuck on this issue. Like you backed me into a corner here.
Okay, so an RFI is just a form, a process that we do to log all of their questions, right? So like if it was a small project, like you and I doing something else, we would just talk to each other and work it out, right? We wouldn't have to necessarily do that, because just a few of us in the room, but we have a lot of people, it's best in over 2 years in this case.
Yeah.
What we're gonna wanna do is we wanna log these things, so if there's an issue, we can go back and document that.
Sure.
So the RFI is like what Dan just mentioned here, is some of these are just questions. What about this? What about that? I don't understand this. Not every contractor is really good at what they do.
And not all
Right? So some of them, they need to be led. This is what you said.
So are we overstating these RFIs to make a case where we pay somebody longer to hang around? That's the thing, right? You know, meaning, if we looked at this RFI log, they're like, oh, should we use galvanized or non-galvanized log? Or is there indeed some issues with design that was inadequate design that caused all these RFIs?
So none of, we do designs, none of them are perfect, right? You
Why
have to see
not?
a perfect,
Why
and you have to see a
not?
perfect kind of plan, because people have
a
metal.
cow.
Well,
I'm like, really? I'm
Yeah,
gonna park this thing in the ocean. I got a $20 million satellite, and you're gonna tell me, well, you know, we tried.
yeah, well, okay, maybe he's perfect, but the rest of them aren't, right? So we work with what we have, right? So we do, and even when you put a design package this big together, you have several people working on it. Sure. So it's difficult to always get everybody checking each other's work.
Sure.
So there's gonna be issues, and that's why we have change orders. That's why we put 10%, 5% contingency to cover those issues, right? So I think that's just always gonna be in every project. This project is $20 million.
Sure.
It looks a lot bigger, you mentioned that earlier. So we shouldn't be blown away because we see a big number when we're looking at a bigger number to do the effort.
Right.
So if you're looking for, okay, is there somebody to blame, something like that? Well, I think in any situation, we're always gonna have,
Yeah, but see, I see that they're shifting it, you know, basically the design and whoever the whole conversation is about, well, and we'll just public pay for this, like, you know, kind of like.
Well, I have a question on who's on the hook for the extenuation contract. You're saying, like in one of your notes here, you're talking about the building proposal is assumed to be completed in 12 months and actually ended up being 18 months. So who's responsible for that 6-month flop that cost us a lot of money. Like, when you're formulating a contract with a contractor and said, I can do this in 12 months, and he doesn't do it for 18 months, why are we responsible for their total failure in that? And cost us way a lot of money for 6 months extra long of a project.
I mean, every project is, right? Because
Sure.
if they work for us, they're our contractor. That's not really us and them. And sometimes it ends up that way, but that's not the goal. The goal is to work to solve what we're trying to accomplish.
Right.
And that's what we've been doing. Again, you go back to the foundation change orders that occurred right out of the chute, really caused a problem with our critical path, right? Critical path is our length of our project. So that's what's been pushing us, is that when those things occurred at the very beginning, it started to snowball and other things being impacted by the size of them and then the timing of them in the project. So the other things got delayed. And so then we work more through this process. So some of it is, it does get a little bit muddled because there's a lot of things moving, a lot of moving parts in the size. So that in essence has been, and there's another.
Is there a safety net built into these contracts where there's a?
Yeah, it's called liquidated damages, yeah. Liquidated damages on the other end, if they don't beat it at a certain date, then charge. That's set. So it is,
So the
our.
6 months was in that grace period that was written into the contract.
No, it's not a grace period. So when a change order occurs, impacts the critical path, they also get it.
Yeah.
So if it costs them X, they get that, and they also get days of the contract. So we're still within the days of the contract.
Yeah.
Right, like February 8th is supposed to be there. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Like the 50 minutes after the 90 minutes.
That's, in a soccer team, that soccer, I never finished it. Yeah, there's this, design team that works.
Have they submitted a change that matches?
There's the other,
That's the second amendment on your,
Oh,
the one after this one.
Okay.
and that's their cost to be out until February.
So you know, I'm looking at just kind of the numbers and trying to understand. Right, so as the architect, you came up with a design, you took a concept, you came up with a design, you helped guide the city through the process of contractor selection. You say that your eyes on the site, you know, at some amount, 256 hours is I think what you're gonna spend, or what you're asking for, another 256 hours. That's, you know, 12 hours for 22 weeks, so I assume that's 12 hours, that's probably what, half a day becomes. So out of that, that's $74,000.
No, there's two breakdowns of that.
That's $43,000.
Correct. No, 45, 40.
$45,000. Out of the $74,000 change order.
Correct.
So you're more than half of the change order.
I guess so, if you're looking at those numbers. Yes.
Are you adding more than half of the value? Price of work of Nakano Associates or RH2?
Yes, if you look at those, the Nakano is just our landscape architect. Travis Fitzwater is our electrical engineer. Ryder Myers is mechanical engineers. Ethan Beck is our structural engineer.
What about RH2?
RH2 is a civil engineer, and there's a ton of utility stuff still coming up. That said, we still do have RH2 money in the pot that they haven't spent yet. So again, this is, just looking ahead. And these are proposals from our consultants in particular.
So then the other question is what percentage of this? Yeah, so I have a hard time because it's like the leadership on the project's fine. The architecture firm, I don't know if you guys understood that you assume some sort of risk when you take a lead. I thought of it like this, and you have some sort of contingency. But it looks like the public's gonna pay for the extra time, right? And we all know in any sort of contract business like this that, You know, we can be overpriced, but if we're on time, we're gonna control price better. The minute we're late, price is now out of the box, and we're, you know, it's hard to get it back in. And that's where we are now, we're out of the box. I mean, and, you know, so how do we, you know, why don't we look at leadership and say, how do you get back in the box?
The discussions are still continuing, right, with the contractor for liquidated damages and.
It may occur. I mean, obviously, if we want to avoid getting down that path, right? We still need to get to the. Is ARC worth the 74,000? Yes, they are. They are providing that leadership for the team to get there. And the contract we had before us are what we need to get there. And it is not an exorbitant price from my perspective from the time I've been working in construction. Right? I don't see this as somebody needs to take a hit here. I do believe that.
Yeah, but there's errors somewhere, right? You know, basically there's multiple errors in multiple areas. And why does the public have to pay for that kind of stuff?
It's $1 million question. What happens if we say no?
Well, I can answer that. You know, certainly you could say no. The problem here is that we have a project that's ongoing. John and I are neither architects or structural landscape architects. Questions arise that have to do with those topics. The only person who can really respond to those is the engineer, the architect that stamped the plans. And so we would be outside of our wheelhouse and assuming a lot of liability that isn't ours to accept. So we really need them here as part of this team in order to be able to provide that backup.
True, yeah, and, you know, because it takes a lot of time and labor to do those kind of research type of aspects. I would differ that I think that, you know, your staff is very talented, they could do that, but yes, they have other. Or we hire other people to do those tasks for us, you know, that's where I think it comes back to this thing that I keep kind of harping on, is like, well, you know, it was bid, it was designed, it's all a package deal, you know, whoever the team is working on that, figure it out. So don't come back to the public and say, oh, by the way, I want some more money because I screwed this project up, not being you guys, but the whoever was working on it, right? It's like.
I don't know, I'd like the record to reflect that, the question of errors still is something that can easily be resolved by looking at specifically what RFIs were asked.
Right,
and
yeah.
such, right? We have all that information.
Sure.
We didn't come prepared with all that.
Yeah, I know, and that's, again, sorry, that, you know, because we drag these, you know, this is kind of an exercise in fun tonight.
And part of that, again, we want to bring the contract. Question as well, because there's a lot of, I would say the majority of all this is back on their responsibilities.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely, yeah, you know. Because that's where I get stuck on, you know, doing this, you know, you may not know. But you know, I don't think you guys did anything wrong, maybe, possibly not, right? Structure, framing, and the building and foundation, which is.
I would still want to stop you at that specific point and say, I'm not sure what you're talking about specifically. I know if it's about base plates and things like that.
No, yeah, exactly, because the foundation that you guys designed, that for some odd reason, they decided that they couldn't supply the building for.
Yeah, let me clarify. The basis of design had a foundation and a structure, superstructure. That was put out on the street to a pre-engineered metal building manufacturer who changed the superstructure to cause us to change and revise the foundation design. We had nothing to do with the superstructure at that point, but all of our.
Yeah, and see, somebody in that process made the decision to, you know, that's where.
Yeah, I fundamentally dispute with that. You chose to accept that contract during those changes because you felt it was the expedient. Yes, and it may well have been a very good decision. I mean, I really don't want to punish anybody. So you gotta understand, I've had on 5 different occasions, people concerned about their water bills going, what's going on? And I go, well, that big, beautiful, facility we're building is part of it, right? And they're like, well, what's going on with that? And when's that gonna be done? Why do I need that? And so I get a lot of questions about this stuff, and I just need to be able to answer them, right? And for me, one of the first questions I always ask is, what are we doing to keep it from being late? Because late is gonna cost money, right? So, and then when I look at late, I look at the leaders, right, the prime contractor, the architects, and I go, what are they doing to help us stay in the bubble? And for us, what's the bubble? It's not the schedule, because that's blown out of the window, it's the price, right? So what are you doing to help me stay in my price bubble? Right, that's my question back to you guys, and that's gotta be on you, the architect, and the prime contractor. What are you doing to help me keep in the bubble? And for me, what I see, and you guys all do a job. But on the other hand, I still have to ask, what have I done to help you guys and ask, can I answer your question? Has the city been responsible? So can you help me with that? That's why I said, what's the value that you had out there? And it was an honest question, day by day, right? Why is that worth so much? Because when I look at this, I go, you should be taking this amount out of your man. Right? As if I were negotiating this in a different area, I'd probably just say, no. Right? And then let me, you come back and convince me that it doesn't come out of your bottom line. Right? Because it would come out of my bottom line, right? In a commercial. Here it's going to come out of the water rates, right? Which for me is probably the most painful discussion I have. There's a lot of things I can do, talk about parks, I can talk about roads, I can talk about this. Those things are all easy until I get the 300-400 emails on why do I have the second highest water rate in the state?
How do we keep this from happening again?
Well,
this is the second time we come back with the same order.
To be perfectly honest, I hope we don't have to do a building.
I never want to do anything ever.
And that goes back to what we were talking about. And I do want to correct something because I don't want the city staff is not prepared to do this type of work. There is no one trained on staff to handle a vertical construction building project. And, the comment was made that, we probably could and we're really good. And while I appreciate the confidence, structural engineering and architecture is nobody's gig here at the city. We do not do it. We don't have the education, the licensing, anything. I just want to make sure that understanding is clear, which is why it's so critical to have these members on our team, because they're ensuring that the quality of the project is, and that the intent and the functional requirements of it are being met.
Yeah.
And so that's where then we get back to, when we get a potential change order, how valid is this thing? And what can we do to minimize those costs?
And that's part of your choice anyway, there's all these things like Councilor was pointing out, that there's all these items that come up that you have control over.
You gotta make a change for potential.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'm building, here's my design, I'm not accepting change orders, build it.
Yeah, and again, that is the value we bring you right now. We're pushing back on numerous change orders that have come up over the, or potential change.
Sure.
That have come up from the contract. They know the documents show this, blah,
Right.
blah, blah, back and forth with that. So that, again, is, I think, the value that
Yeah.
we bring.
Oh, yeah, definitely, and that's all part of the package, all part of the bid, all part of what the public wanted to pay for, right? So that's all within that box.
So,
Whatever. Don't come back to me and ask me for extra money that I didn't cause a change that I didn't want.
So I'll be honest, I never had come to a council session. Sorry, at this level.
Public and private.
Yeah, and usually it does come back to things, I'm knowing the details.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've never had these types of questions.
Our concern from CDC is that the city $4,000 bill gave to us. We made a contract for us to set up this building in a certain amount of time. It was delayed, and we usually put a additional funds for ourselves to make a mistake. I would think the same thing happened to you. It may not take 6 months or a year to go through, maybe a little longer. That's your responsibility, not mine or the city, but you're gonna do it correctly for us. So nothing that we did wrong, that's your charge would be picked up by you, which I would think would build into your original bid in the first place. That was the biggest problem.
Yeah, Tom, I could somewhat respond. I don't know if it's a response you want to hear, but we were woefully together for the project. I mean, we go back years for figuring a fee on a $14 million job. And our original fee was based on a $14 million job, not an $18 million or $16 million. Yeah, the makeup, some of this makeup we're seeing is simply those math situations. That said, I'm hoping the city can, again, back up and support the fact that we've continued to support the project all along with diligence. And things that, for instance, happened in design where there have been revision changes, but working as a team and realizing we had to do things along design, minus out of what we've already taken on or asked for in prior amendments, there's a lot of things that we did design that we didn't charge for. Knowing that, again, as a principle, knowing what we had for CA coming up, minus not knowing all the unpredictables of the foundation, we would have covered it. We would have been totally fine. We wouldn't even be talking here. Event finance. So this again is just simply the extension really of time that we're trying to make up for to support the team to the end.
Yeah, one last question. So you told us the value. With this extension, are we going to finish? Is there another?
I hope to help.
Ryan said no, so.
Yeah, so we were having this conversation earlier, get this project finished up, obviously, that's the goal of it. I would have loved to have finished it up. Actually, you know when I would have loved to have finished it up was about 10 years ago. Unfortunately, we can't go back in time. And I think that is something that we need to pay attention to here, and I'll circle back, Councilmember Climens, to your question in just a minute. But this project is 20 years old now. And contracts, for instance, the contract that Dan referenced, was negotiated by the previous city administrator at a project cost that was far below what we actually then received bids at, $2 million. Sounds like a lot to me. We've been in, from that perspective, we've been fighting a battle this whole project to make sure that we're adequately funded. Some of that, though, none of us have control over. That was previously negotiated. I mean, shoot, I think that was negotiated before I was even working here. The point is that what we need to do now is make sure that we finish this quickly. I made a promise to my public works folks when I was superintendent that in my time here I was going to. And by God, come hell or high water, I'm going to do it.
For a little while.
So does that mean you're putting it there?
If you want me to.
No, please don't.
No, I appreciate that. But I do say this because I want the council to know we are trying our best to bring this and as quickly as possible. You know what? We do need help from our. And I realize that maybe the picture that we painted here isn't completely selling you on that, but I can tell you that without them, you're going to fail. We're going to have issues. We need them. And so I would just ask that you consider that when you consider whether these are contracts you're. When it comes right down to it, we don't have the expertise here on staff to bring this to the end. We need that. For Rand.
I think it's just a frustration for public and private projects, right? Where in private projects, you're like, this is the budget, get it done. And there's no more money at the end of the rainbow here. When public works, you're like, well, we can just pull in here. And then, especially when it's coming from the water sewer funds, which are a very delicate situation in our city right now, we want to make sure that we're being ethical and above board as best we can with our residents to make sure that we're spending our money as wisely as humanly possible. Even though obviously this building is very going to be well needed and well loved and utilized, it's going to be an asset to the city. Just like, how do we just be as ethical and above board as possible?
And I do want to add too that I am very sensitive about the rate issue as well. I'm looking forward to additional discussions on that whole bailiwick as we move forward. And I don't take for granted the position that you're in to have to provide those responses. I think that for all involved, the best thing we can do is project done. And my goal is February.
Have everyone shared their opinion? Are we ready to move on? Looks like we are.
We're ready to move on.
All right, very good.
But I think we're ready to move on.
I know.
So item H, Sadie, you want to read it just for the record? And it's probably the same argument, so.
Item H is for discussion on resolution 2996 about authorizing approval of a supplement to the professional services agreement to provide construction management support for the construction of the Public Works Center.
All right, Ryan.
Get away with ditto.
I do have one question on this one. Is there any fiduciary responsibility by they're reviewing our change orders, but what is putting them in their best interest? Our best interest?
Good question. So PPG, we have pretty much four design team contracts that we use. And as long as they provide great service to the city, they pretty much get to stay there, right? And when they stop doing that, then we move on to somebody else. KPG's been with us for over 10 years. One of their principal, I've known him for 20 years. He's done a tremendous job, and so does the people. The people that we have working for us, I'll tell you this, they do a great job for us. They support us overboard to make sure they give us the best product. I can assure you that. Contractors, they come and go, but the design teams that we have, they really do treasure the relationships they have with the cities they work with, and they have to work hard to keep them because there's a whole bunch of other firms out there that want to take their spot. So I can vouch for all four of them. They've been given the city, the citizens, 100% their awesome.
I can appreciate that. When I was at GC doing commercial contracting stuff, any change order we got, we did a 10% markup on top of that as a GC. Is that something that is also being included in these change orders in addition to the costs that are being?
Yeah, all of our consultants, they have overhead rate that's that they all of them that we have are usually a little bit lower than market. They do have a certain percentage that they put on cover their overhead. That is not a.
Would it be fair to say that overhead cost should be the cost of the change order, but it seems like we're getting double dipped here with an additional cost because of change orders.
But I think if I understood you correctly, the markup that John was just talking about is the markup that the consultant applies to their sub-consultants for management of those contracts and what have you, the overhead, keep the lights on at their office, all that kind of stuff. Are you talking about a markup on the change order themselves?
Yes.
Okay, I don't believe there is a markup on the change orders. There's nothing.
Okay, so $20,000 change order from Company X comes directly to Bonnie Lake as $20,000, not $2,000. Okay. That was how we avoided adding additional costs as a GC to the project by just that change order cost itself was our to cover whatever occurrences we had.
Okay, so maybe what Justin's talking about is this. So the prime contractor, with the change order rules, they get a percentage of their subs.
Yeah.
So if the sub comes in and says there's a change order of 10,000, then there's a percentage added to that the prime gets just because they're the prime.
Right.
That's different. That's not what we're talking about here. These are consultants that work for the city.
Okay. Okay.
So kind of on a previous discussion though, we had basically ARC saying, hey, that was a $16 million job, $4 million. Everything, right? Because they were in the process a long time ago. I don't think that's the situation with KPG though, right? Because, you know, they're more like, they bid on this box. They knew the box was $24 million project.
Right, so they bid on those certain number of days. They said, okay, how many days do you need me? And let's say we say it's 300 days. They bid on 300 days. They gave us 300.
Right.
And then we moved to 320 days or 50 days or whatever. So now it's the 50 days. The added days that they're adding here, they're not.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, yeah. And that's that duration versus work kind of thing that you're kind of harping on before, right? It's like all of a sudden, how do they get more hours that were required? Yes, the project is longer in duration, it doesn't mean more work. Calendar has been extended. We're not paying people to stand around, obviously. You know, their work is being performed, the same amount of work. The building didn't change size. It didn't go from a $24 million to a $28 million building.
Right, every month they get pay estimates. So the pay estimates, even though it's still, for say, $20,000, instead of being divided by 12, it's divided by 8. So they're working through all those pay estimates. They're going through all the change orders, the ones that haven't been addressed yet. They're going through every one of those to make sure that we're getting a fair shake on if it's really our cost or not.
But where did the extra effort come from? Where did the extra hours on their part come from?
Because every day that they work on those efforts, right, they're not done yet, they're not completed, right? Those change orders, the PCOs that are out there, right, the pay estimates that are still being done,
But that didn't change. I don't think that just because the calendar got longer, that didn't change.
Yeah, well, it does, because we have weekly meetings, right? We do things every week. We're tracking this project as it goes along. Make sure that we're on top of it.
Yeah,
right?
we wouldn't, if work is, you know, that's, you know, I'm hung up on that thing, right?
Okay, well, we didn't get done in 300 days, right? Or whatever the days are, what, we didn't get done that, right? We're now at 400 days, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that difference, that delta still has to be addressed. People are still out there working, right? So things are still getting accomplished, even though they're getting less done per month. Thought they would get done.
That's not the way it works.
It doesn't depend
There's
on
only
the
X number, it
hours.
takes X number of hours to do a task.
Okay.
And we didn't, there was some extra, like a change order that generated extra time needed.
Yeah, that's it. That extra time. When they do a change order and say you owe us 30 working days, now we just got 30 working days added to everybody's effort. Right, absolutely. Well done. And anybody that's in there, right, now has to track things longer. Has to be on the job longer.
What you were saying is, if supply chain is steel,
Yeah.
that doesn't change the scope of the work, it doesn't change the cost of efforts.
It doesn't
It
change
extends
the
the duration
calendar.
of the, right, but not as a result of
Yeah.
the scope.
Well, understood, but there's also other, it's not just one thing, right? There's a lot of things happening. $20 million of stuff happening. You can have it all done in 12 months, or you can spread it out over 18, but there's still being stuff done. That is not being done in those first 12 months.
The hours didn't, calendar changed. The hours in the task didn't change. You know, it's fine if you want to say that you're paying people to stand around. That's fine, that's appropriate. But I don't think it's a good business practice. You know, you could have like easily said, hey, you know what? Don't do those every week. Our budget for you is only whatever it was, KPG. Your budget is that. You can only work that many hours. We're not expecting you to work that many more hours. How do you do this accounting and check for us in the amount of hours that you contracted us for? You know, it's like, well, oh man, we're gonna have to take off every Friday then. Yeah, good, because they're not inspectors. They're not out there on the site doing stuff directly for us. They're doing their accounting and all the appropriate paperwork and all that kind of stuff and checking all those things.
Yeah, sure, but it also doesn't account for the inefficiencies of your contractor, right? So that's something you don't control. So if they're being inefficient and things are doing what they, right? So.
But again, they're in that box, right? You know, I'm just being argumentative with you.
Sure.
It's me, right?
No, I'm not, this is not, I don't feel that, sir.
No.
We're just discussing, right? So I understand your concept, what you're saying. Stop.
Because somebody's in control of the, you know, the people doing the labor and stuff, and just saying, hey, Bob, go home, the plumbing isn't here yet.
You're seeing the contractor come in,
Or whoever.
and why,
You know.
what do we do about it?
Well, what, you know, again, you know, because you guys are the extra skill stuff. They'll come to us and ask for more money because, you know, you're supposed to be in the box.
Yeah.
Well, you did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes we don't tell the contractor what to do, we don't manage.
Well, somebody should. Right?
We
Well,
say that.
there's a law somewhere.
There is, and it's on the different side. Problem is, when you start directing a contractor, then you can solve a lot of problems.
No, you can't do that.
Exactly. So if they're inefficient.
That's their problem.
Exactly. But it isn't.
Don't make their problem our problem.
It isn't always done in a vacuum.
We need to submit a change
Yeah.
back charging for our consultant.
There you go.
Some of that may be a conversation that after the project. The specifications are written, and regardless of these things, they're supposed to move forward as quickly as possible to bring the job to. And then items such as that, discussed at the end.
We get a refund on their bid?
I cannot guarantee
Right, I got
that.
for more, but
What we need right now is
Yes.
Right, yeah.
But if they like more,
Well, at a certain point, you know, what John was saying earlier, you know, it's associated with, point that runs out. That's where the term liquidated damages that you've seen thrown around, that's where that kicks in. There starts to be a monetary penalty that the contractor has to pay for each day that they're going beyond those days that they have allocated for the job.
we haven't hit that point yet.
I mean,
February 8th is that date.
that's for the whole entire project.
Not the paving. So we had to suspend the paving portion of it because we got into a place where we weren't gonna get the results. So that portion of it will be pushed out until we get one.
Go back to KPG, right? It's like, why should we pay more money? Because you claim they're doing more work. That if they're doing more work.
Well, they didn't anticipate the amount of change orders that we've had here, sure, the PCO, the chamber, but we did not anticipate that. So they they have a lot of work.
And then so you go from that loop right into this change order. What do you mean change order? Or what an R5? R5 is like starting to go back into Danbury with the design, right? And I'm like thinking, well,
So how do you complete?
right?
These
But that's sort of your argument.
well, it can't be straight through. And it's part of frustrations of project management.
Sure.
It's not-
We do it all day long, right?
Right.
It's a new one. It's a dance.
Sometimes it's a dance. Sometimes it's a like.
The council will be just all excited so that they can bring all the CEC issues down here there. No, never again. I told you, that's why I brought this one down here.
Have we all, sorry about that. Has everyone had their chance to speak?
Conversation with KPG. Council, yes. What can we do to get KPG to work within their box? They did what they did. They got X number of hours. Figure it out. They're professionals.
you know, I think I hear what you're saying, Dan, but to me, it's like, they bid on a box with a certain size, but that box is getting larger now.
If it changed, if we force changes to the box, you know, that's understandable, right? And that's why we have amendment number 2. Why we get to amendment number 3, we start this.
My guy slows his machine down from 100%, which is what I quoted at, to 75%. And we could charge only more because my guy decided to lose efficiency on it. I think that's what Dan's trying to do. I understand the whole concept of government working. That's not the case here. Unfortunately, paying what we paid because, well, John said this is a $24 million project. In our world, it's an $8 million project. And just because it's $24 million doesn't mean it's $24 million worth of work. That's $24 million worth of cost. necessarily reflective of the work.
So I don't hear any other discussion. I think we've kind of had it, huh?
You're gonna miss this, right? Really?
Yeah, I'm starting to feel that way now, yes.
I walked out an hour ago.
Anyway, it's always good. Hey, we make fun of this stuff, but it's always good when council asks questions and gets involved and gets deep into it. I think that's the way the system works, and I love that. No matter how boring it could be or how exciting or crazy. So it's never stop doing that. I think that's tremendous. We have a good team. So if we're done discussing that resolution, we'll move that forward, I guess, next week and see what happens. Unless, Ryan, do you have any other questions?
I have no addition.
All right. So with that, we have no exec session or closed session. So have a good week. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
You.